Hello everyone, and welcome to Camelot Chat. I'm your hostess, Shannon Watson, and this month we are talking about King Arthur's 4 queens and their fearsome fathers. Welsh sources suggest that there were 3 Guineveres, each with a different father, each married to King Arthur. We have already covered the subject of one of Arthur's many lovers, the Saxon shield maiden Gwenhild, who bore him a son, in the last episode. So, 1 down, 3 to go. Let's dig in. Today's episode is about Queen Guinevere herself, the one woman formally and certainly designated as Arthur's queen. I'm calling it Guinevere, 4 fathers for a phantom queen. The original version of Guinevere's name was Guinevere, which renders as white or blessed spirit, specter, or demon in Proto-Brythonic. It has also been suggested that Gwyn or Gwen may have been a title linked to the throne. While this is possible, I've already covered the subject of Guinevere's names and titles in an earlier episode, so we won't delve too far into that here. Let's just assume that there was one legitimate Guinevere. I will get to the subject of her illegitimate half-sister in a later episode, and in the sequels to my book, The Wanderer and the Wolves. While the meaning of the name Guinevere has been hotly disputed over the centuries, what it boils down to, if evocative and mysterious, is simple enough. What is not simple is that Guinevere has been listed as having several fathers. The top 3 are Gwythyr ap Grydal, King Garlon of Galore, and King Leodegan. I'm going to dive more deeply into King Leodegan's name and title in the next episode. Suffice it to say that he was variously called Leodegrance, Leondegrance, Leodegran, and Leodegan, each of which is quite the mouthful. It was King Leodegan who gifted King Arthur with the Round Table, or with the loyalty of the company of the Round Table, as a wedding present, which of course reads like a dowry. The romances say that Leodegan was one of the few Briton chieftains who accepted the young Arthur as his overlord, and was therefore attacked by Arthur's mortal enemy, King Urien. When Arthur rescued Leodegan, saving his castle and kingdom, he met and fell in love with the lovely Guinevere. There is another, less lovely theory, however. This outlines how Leodegan rebelled against the young, unblooded Arthur's new reign, claiming that Arthur attacked and defeated the king in battle, seizing the queen as a war prize, marrying her by capture, and taking her kingdom and the loyalty of her warriors for his own. The queen, her defeated father, and all her chieftains would have been forced to swear fealty to their sometime enemy Arthur, and to fight for him in future, probably against their own former allies. This jibes better with what we know of savage 5th century practices in Britain. Leodegan fathered a second daughter, out of wedlock and under extremely shady circumstances. This daughter, unsurprisingly, became known as the false Guinevere. Given the troublesome conditions of her conception, it is no wonder she grew up to be dishonest, treasonous, and homicidal. Once Guinevere and Arthur married, Leodegan sort of just disappears from the tale for a really long time. Geoffrey of Monmouth said he died during one of Arthur's Gallic campaigns, but that may be a later gloss. But I'm saving my take on that version for my books. More on Leodegan in the next episode. Now let's look at the other 2 candidates for Father of the Year, Garlon of Galore and Gwythyr ap Grydal. King Garlon of Galore is mentioned in a German version of the Arthurian romances. The name Garlon may have stemmed from 2 Proto-Brythonic words such as Gorglin, over valley, giving King Garlon the meaning of king over the valley, or else it could have come from Carglin, champion of the valley. There are certainly lots of valleys in the British Isles from which to choose. Or it could have come from the Proto-Brythonic word gwr, rendering Gwrglin, man of the valley. This brings us to the second part of his name, Galore, more specifically, of Galore. The of would seem to designate galore as a locative, so we should be looking for geographic designations as translations of this name. Therefore, let's ignore the usual late 17th century English translation of the word galore as abundance. The Proto-Brythonic gal means might or ability. But while suitable for an honorific, might is not a geographic term and does not correspond well with the preceding of. The same word, gal, is in Welsh an enemy or foe. Now we're getting somewhere. While enemy or foe isn't necessarily a geographic designation, it does sometimes describe a place inhabited by an enemy or a foe. So let's take a look at the second part of the word, or. Or in Old French is a suffix used to denote a quality or a characteristic, the same way in which the suffix ness is employed in English. That word might have gotten attached to the Welsh gal during the Middle Ages when France and Wales were allied against their common enemy, England. A number of Arthurian romances were written during this period, including Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, the alliterative Mort Arthur, Cruchien de Troyes' Yvain, the Knight of the Lion, and Thomas Chestray's retelling of the earlier 12th century Old French lay, L'Envol. What would the Welsh gal and the Old French or give us? Galore, something like of the foe. I'm still not convinced. Let's try something else. Could the Welsh gal plus the Pictish ur, U-E-R, meaning over, work here? That would give us galur, overfoe, rendering something like King Garlin overfoe, king over the valley over the foe. Still not sure. Let's take another look at the whole word. The words Garlin and galore look an awful lot alike. Each starts with G-A, followed by some combination of R-L, and another vowel or vowels. What if one was an anagram of the other, a play on words meant to create a melodic alliterative name? What if we rearrange them? What do we get then? Possibly something like one word with a G plus a vowel plus an L, and a second word with a G plus a vowel plus an R. So if one of the words is gal, foe or enemy, and the other word is gore, that brings us to something approximating a place name. Because aside from its yuckier connotations, gore in English means a point or a triangle. That sounds fairly place-namey. Or in Welsh is a boundary, limit, or edge. Can we go one better? Yep. Goror, that's G-O-R-O-R, in the same language is a boundary, frontier, or border. That's one better, and it's geographic. So maybe the intermixing of the two names, Garlin and galore, were a confusion of something that was originally intended to designate a boundary or frontier. Maybe this king's name meant something like champion of the frontier, a borderland populated by an enemy tribe. I'm going to leave the resolution of King Garlin and his strange name till the next episode. Let's move on to Guinevere's next father. The name Gwythyr ap Grydal situates us in Wales, or at least in the language that preceded Welsh and obtained in Britain at the time, Proto-Brythonic. Gwythyr commonly renders as the name Victor in modern Welsh. Map or ap means son of, and Grydal means gridiron. So Gwythyr ap Grydal was the victor, son of the gridiron. Gwythyr ap Grydal was known as a supernatural figure, an attribute designated to many royal fathers in Arthurian legend, such as the heinous giant who fathered Olwen in the Welsh tale of Culhwch and Olwen. Doesn't mean Gwythyr was a giant, just that he was larger than life, or a formidable fighter. Maybe he was one of the famous outsized champions of the day, like Gawain and Lancelot and Culhwch, as his name Victor would indicate. But based on the Welsh translation of his name, we find ourselves once again in what looks like Wales. Or do we? Is it possible that Queen Guinevere hailed from 5th century Wales? Yes, the country we now know as Wales, however, was then being newly settled by colonists from what is now known as Scotland, particularly from Stirlingshire and Lothian in the Borders region. These settlers were the Votadini, a northeastern Celtic tribe closely allied to Rome, but possibly also to the Picts, who surrounded them on the north and west. Since they were allied to Rome, the Votadini might have been considered northern Romano-Britons. But at heart, were they? Or were they more like opportunist Britons, who saw in their strategically placed fortresses at Stirling and Edinburgh an advantage and used it to carve out a lucrative deal with the Romans? A trade deal? A military alliance? A calculated series of intermarriages? Who knows? What seems certain is that the leader of these Votadini at the time was a man named Guinevere who had married the daughter of the famous Cole Hen of York, the man who would become known in nursery rhyme as Old King Cole. One of Guinevere's sons married a Pict, and their son became an infamous chieftain, later associated both with Scotland and Wales, well after Guinevere and his tribe had emigrated south and populated Wales. So Queen Guinevere might have been born in the north to a northern king, who later migrated to and became associated with Wales. The name Wales derives from the Old English word vilas, which, while later designating the Welsh people, earlier simply indicated the people of Britannia in general, or more specifically, the strangers or foreigners, meaning the Britons that surrounded the Anglo-Saxons when they first came over from Germania. All of the Britons. This covers a lot of territory, early territory, before any such place as Wales was known, and possibly suggests a fourth potential father, linked to a mighty dynasty, a dynasty allied to Rome and well suited to a powerful queen, who was later described by Geoffrey of Monmouth as a Roman lady of good family, a lady whose strategically situated birthright would have presented as prime pickings to an up-and-coming but unproven Duke of War looking to make his mark on the world. We'll get back to that in next week's episode. That episode examines the father of the false Guinevere, Queen Guinevere's treacherous, illegitimate half-sister. Though they had different mothers, the two Guineveres were fathered by the same man. Theirs was a bitter rivalry that nearly cost them both their lives, rent the kingdom in two, and, so say the Welsh bards, caused the dreadful strife at Camelot, in which both Arthur and his successor Modred perished. Thus closed the so-called Golden Age of Camelot. And thus closes this episode of Camelot Chat. If you can't wait for more Arthurian lore till the next episode, you will find my historical fiction novel, The Wanderer and the Wolves, told from Queen Guinevere's perspective, on Amazon.com. The link is included below. And be sure to check out my author page at shanaverestudios.com. Until next week, people who read live in many worlds. Books are the surest portals to those worlds. So keep living, keep reading, and keep dreaming till we meet again.